20 years ago that we had one of the deadliest terrorist attacks that ever happened, one of the saddest event that has ever occurred in the 2000s. And not only that, it's still is sad to talk about it. Hey guys, I'm Anthony. Welcome back to the channel, and today is technically the video, if what I'm going to be uploading is going to be like 2 days later, but this is just so sad to talk about because it's been 20 years ago that the 9/11 happened. It's September 11th, 2001, and that was where the terrorist attack came up and destroyed the World Trade Center in New York, and that was where it killed 3,000 people and had more of the victims that were injured, and thankfully they recovered. You know, my heart goes out to them to tell us the stories about their experiences when they were in New York, and they were trying their hardest to get out of the World Trade Center, and it was like they got injured. Thankfully they recovered, so they got stories for us to hear. We shall not forget about the victims' stories about when they experienced one of the scariest events they've ever experienced. Because, wow, that kind of rhymed. Well, the thing is, and I think I will give all my thanks to the firefighters and every rescuers out there to do their hardest to rescue all of the victims that were in the World Trade Center and trying to get out of there. And my heart and my prayers goes out to them, the fallen victims that passed away and recovered. And I remember like a little bit of a story from myself when this happened. I was a baby when this event happened, and that was where my dad worked at a mortars company as a mechanic worker at the time, and that was where when the 9/11 happened, that was where he actually told me to this day that when on like 20 years ago when he used to work on the mechanic works store back then, and that was where my dad told me a story about when like a couple of days later and a week later, that was where he heard so many, because he used to work there a lot, and that was where a lot of people were there too. And that was where he heard so many people don't even understand what terrorist attack means, or don't even know what the terms that they're saying does it even mean. My dad remembers that on the day he one of the times that he actually took days off because of the people around him don't even understand what certain like terrorist attack, what the Islamic attacks means. Like they didn't even people back then, they didn't understand what those mean, so he had to take a days off when it happened. I mean, it keep this in mind. This whole thing happened when this was the same year, a couple months ago, where George W. Bush was sworn as in the office of President of the United States, and yeah, I know many people will call him either W. Bush or Bush Jr. I've always called him W. Bush, not trying to be funny, but I've always called him by that. But my dad always called him Bush Jr. And yes, he is the son of the H.W. Bush, who passed away 3 years ago, and along with John McCain. John McCain, he is my favorite, regardless of any Republican candidates. He's my favorite. John McCain, he is a true hero, true patriot. I love that guy. I miss him too. And W. Bush, that was where he got signed into the office, and that was where I do disagree on his response on the 9/11 when it first occurred, where he decided to do military force against the terrorist attack. That one I did disagree on, but he did also he appeared on the news talking about it 20 years later. And let me tell you, even though as much as controversial or backlash that he had when he was in president of the terms, along with Vice President Dick Cheney, that was where, as much as backlash he had, and of course with the vice president, and that was where, as much as he had backlash, it was actually pretty refreshing to hear him talk, man. I mean, compared to the previous president we had to deal with 4 years ago, and it's just, I'm talking about like 4 years like now. I'm not talking about 4 years before George W. Bush came out. But you should know. But I mean, as much as anyone can disagree on his his terms or his statements, but it is refreshing to hear him talk because he's more on the positive side. So at least he's uplifting. And that, I mean, this was back when Republicans used to care and had like more like used to talk more on the subject. They were more positive side on the sides of the things, and that was where now the Republicans are just so different. It's so sad because now Republicans are all negative. They're just complete crazy. Like it's crazy. I mean, don't get me wrong. The only Republican I love the most is John McCain. I do love him, but again with W. Bush, he came out to speak about 20 years later, and as much as anyone can disagree with him, I actually love. I mean, comparing him to like the previous president Trump. Oh my God, it would be different. And speaking of that, Trump did not appear on the 9/11. Who would have guessed it? And of course his wife also didn't appear on there. Who would have also guessed it? But again, this whole terrorist attack, thinking about it 20 years later, I actually also had a story of mine where I used to have my friend Carlos, my friend I had since elementary school to all the way to the ninth grade, where I had him ever since, and he told me stories about when he was in New York, and he told me stories about that, like the actors, or like he told me stories about when it comes to his mind, and I always love to hear him talk about anything that's up to his mind. And I do remember I was actually in middle school. I believe I was in the 8th grade or 7th grade. That was where he told me, like, years later I was in New York, and I remember this terrorist attack has happened and we don't know what to speak. And that is just like, my friend Carlos, who was my student of mine in school, and he told me stories that he was in New York when it happened, and had a complete loss of words when he found out this happened. Well, I mean, even though he was a year, I believe he was a year older than me, but man, or actually a year younger than me. My bad. But it's hearing his story, and especially how it impacted him, especially how he was in New York. It was so sad. It was insane. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, I miss my friend Carlos. I missed him very much. If you're watching this, I know you probably may not watch this video, but I wanted to give you a little bit of shout out if you're watching it. And I miss you, Carlos. Hopefully we'll get a chance to meet again soon, especially when the whole virus slows down. And hopefully it'll slow us down, but not even close to now. But man, that's the thing. When people say, like, that's the thing about the 9/11. When it happened, it used to be like you reuniting with us all together to actually talk about it, and actually, well, even though people can be a little bit sensitive, but at least we can actually unite us, like at least like pull us all together, like at least reunited with all of us and the Americans. But now it's just like with the virus, now it's so hard to like reunite with people because they're so careless and they are not just caring about anything. Now, how are we gonna? This whole thing is just era differences. I mean, not like a natural era differences, but when you talk about the 2000s people, it's all the way to 2020s. Oh my God, it's completely different. How people think it, how they change their conversations. It's insane. It is so sad to hear that 20 years ago when the 9/11 happened, it was all over the news, and even on the newspaper too. I remember the newspaper used to be delivered in our house every single day for updates of what's going on. And they used to do that until I think it was they used to do that a couple of years ago, definitely before the virus happened. But I do remember that. I remember like it was yesterday. And I remember I heard it from the Howard Stern show. I know he had backlash recently because he had the Miley Cyrus invite of the Metallica. I completely agree that he does. I mean, I would not say he deserves the backlash, but it's just his personal taste. I mean, again, as much as I dislike Miley Cyrus' music, I know it's pretty different because I know now he had backlash when he invited Miley Cyrus to perform at Metallica. That one was pretty stupid, and yeah, that was pretty dumb. But again, I remember I heard it from the Howard Stern show on the radio, and that was on the radio back in the day where he had his own show. But this was back in the day where he used to host all the time, And that was where he had, because he always invited a lot of celebrities back then. It's, of course, to this day, too. And I remember he talked about it with Robin Quivers, and that was where they both talked about the 9/11. And it was so heartbreaking that they couldn't like find any more updates of who was doing this or what's happening. How many people, how many dead lives are going on? It's so sad. They were on the Lifeline phone back then. It's insane. I do love Howard Stern. I do love his show. I love him a lot. He's a smart guy. I love that guy, and he's a really nice guy. And even though he can be a little raunchy, but he still is a nice guy. He seems pretty down to earth type of guy. And 20 years ago that this has happened. It's so sad. It's still, and we will never forget the stories that the victims and all the rescuers. We will never forget the stories that the heroes and the firefighters have brought to us and shared with us of the stories of how they witnessed, how they saw this events. And for any of you if you're one of the victims of the 9/11 that's watching this video, thank you for the stories that you shared with all of us for your witnesses of what has happened. And it was hugely impactful of how we got a chance to like speak about the stories. Not only that, I mean, it's so impactful, or like it's so like messed up at the same time. It's like, what do we have to say about this? It's so sad. But my thoughts are my prayers and my love goes out to all of the victims and the rescuers. That's going to them, to each of them, for their witnesses, especially their services that tried their hardest to rescue all of the people in the World Trade Center. I have nothing else to say. It's very unspeakable, very, 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 very unspeakable. It's so speechless. I feel so speechless about this 20 years later, and it still is to this day. So very sad, and I have nothing else to say. I am very speechless about it. So let us all remember the stories, and let us this 9/11 will go down as a never forgets. Like this, I know maybe we'll say that like that's why this was so impactful, that this was called a Never Forget 9/11, or Never Forget the September 11, 2001. It still is to this day. And I do remember when the 9/11 happened, that was where every movie decided to go back to the film set and decided to edit some of the parts out, because especially due to the 9/11. For example, like films like Spider-Man 1, Zoolander, multiple movies, etc. And that was where they removed the World Trade Center. I do remember in the Spider-Man 1 trailer where there was a trailer that there was a crime in the helicopter that were flying off. That was where they were caught on the web, and it was between the World Trade Center, and you can see the image of the Spider-Man's eye, and he web slings, and everybody went crazy. And they actually had the original poster for it. By the time the 9/11 happened, that was where it became very inappropriate, and that was where they removed the original poster. And I'm not trying to sound like a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but that clip, he had a World Trade Center in his eye. That was actually in the movie, by the way. I don't know if it was in the theaters at the time, but I do have the DVD when it came out. We still have it to this day, surprisingly. And it still plays really good still, surprisingly. And that image of that, because there was a scene of Spider-Man 1, yes, the Sam Raimi version, that was where the guy was singing pretty much his own interpretation of a Spider-Man song. And that was where, in that scene where Spider-Man has the World Trade Center in his eye, that was where, it's just like that clip in the trailer. That was actually in the movie. I'm surprised a lot of people forgot about that. It was insane. Or maybe they didn't show it in the theaters, possibly, when it came out, maybe. But I do remember the DVD showed it. But I don't know. You let me know if you are one of those people that saw Spider-Man 1 and you actually saw that image in the theaters. You let me know, because I was so young, I can't even remember. I do remember my parents went crazy when those films came out, and that was when Marvel comic books movies were getting started. And it's insane. And not to mention, even in music, especially in musicians that talked about this, or you talked a little bit about it, not a lot, because it would have been too relative to the whole situation that happened. And that was where that was where Paul McCartney wrote the song "Freedom" for the album "Driving Rain." I know a lot of people hated that album because it's slow and more like slower songs. But when you dive into the context of the what was it going on, not just like with the subject matter wise, but especially with his life, he was going through a depression times because he lost Linda McCartney in 1999, or actually 1998. My bad. That was where he lost his former wife, and that's where he deal with Heather. Oof, I can't stand her. Heather Mills, I can't stand her, and you can easily tell. But again, but he wrote the song "Freedom" for his response to the 9/11. Many people thought that this was a song for his message to the W. Bush. I mean, it could make sense. I mean, it depends. I can make sense of what you're coming from and what you're saying. I think this whole thing, he wrote the song "Freedom" was mostly because I think it was because of his response to the 9/11. That's what I think. And that was where also, I do remember also in 2002 when Dream Theater released 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. That was where that one, they had a song on the first disc, which was called, was it? It was called The Great Debate. Well, it's now officially called The Great Debate. Back then it was called Ground Zero, or At Ground Zero, but due to when the 9/11 happened, they decided to take that name off and wanted to put The Great Debate. Even though it's not fully just like the 9/11 attacks, but it's pretty up there. It was more about talking about the president. Not a whole lot, but it does have musical elements of it. But I'm also, I know it's been a while since I made videos, a while, but I've been going through downs. I've been going through a lot of downs in my life, especially, not just like with the 9/11 that happened, but this was like earlier in the year. Okay, a little bit of short summary of why I haven't been making videos is because earlier this year I've been going through really tough times. I mean, that's why I haven't made videos that much in a while. Mostly it's because I've been going through really depression times, but I'm getting back up as months go by. Because it's mostly because I lost the closest to me. It was mostly because my cousin, I'm not gonna name drop, but I do remember I lost my cousin. I was so close to her because it was mostly because my older brother was so close to her, and we hanged out with her all the time. I mean, I hanged out with my cousins all the time back then, and of course with my aunts, all my families, and I lost my cousin. She was so young. She was like a couple of years older than me. A couple of years older. She was only, I believe she was only like, she was only like 26 to 27 years old. So sad. She was like a couple of years older than me. And I do remember the last time I spoke to her was I do remember her when my cousin picked up, or when my cousin texted us, when she wants us to, me and my dad, to fix her vehicle that broke down in the middle of the street, and we decided, okay, we'll go over there to pick you up. So we pick her up and we talked. That was like one of the times we talked. Me and my cousin, we talked, and we fixed our vehicle. And I will never forget the words. She said the words that I will never forget. When we were gonna say bye to her, we said bye. And she says, "I love you guys," and we said, "We love you too." And I will never forget one of the words that she says. One of the last words she says, "I wish we can come visit. I wish we can visit more often." And I was like, "Yeah, we should." I mean, this was last year. This was last year in December that she passed away. That hurt me very much. It hurt me a lot that I was changed to a different person. I don't want to dive too much into it because I don't want to break down immediately. But I just want to explain a little bit about why I haven't made videos. But okay, but again, back to the September 11th, the 9/11. So overall, I can't really say anything enough because it's completely speechless. I can't even express myself how it is. I mean, Disney back then used to have expressed themselves, or they actually talked about Shia LaBeouf. I mean, many other celebrities were had a statement immediately after the 9/11. They had little segments of Disney express themselves where they had like a celebrities talk about the 9/11 that happened. And this was back then when Disney used to be about themselves. They used to like push themselves to boundaries. At least they were trying to like create some experiments going on to the table ideas, like express themselves. I wish they could bring that back. Not they don't do that anymore because maybe it's because of how hurt people can be when they talk about certain subject matters. Maybe I don't know. I miss Disney express themselves. I miss pretty much everything back then. Well, not everything, but you know what I'm saying. Like I miss like kids networks that used to be like all about explaining themselves, express themselves to show us, rather than trying to. I mean, well, they were explaining us more too, but you get the point. I do miss the old Disney explaining themselves. But all I can say about this 9/11, it will go down in history as one of the most unforgettable terrorist attacks that's ever happened in the history of this country that will ever get. Hopefully we don't have none of this. Hopefully this will never happen like this again. My heart, my prayers goes out to you, to all of the fallen heroes, to all of the victims, to all of the rescuers that try their hardest. To all of the rescuers, thank you. We thank you for everything that you put effort to rescue all of the victims that were injured. And we thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you. And sorry if my shirt is a little messed up. I've had this shirt since like a year now, so I have nothing else to say about it. It's definitely one of the saddest that's ever occurred. And what we did on the day of 20-year memorial was we watched the news. I mean, we didn't watch it all day because I watched it pretty much almost all day because my parents would not watch the whole thing. My parents would not watch the whole thing because it would bring them down into a depression, and I completely understand, and I agree. I watched pretty much like all morning. I watched the conference, the memorial, where Bill Clinton and his first lady wife Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, and of course the recent president Joseph Biden and his wife Joe Biden came in to remember those, and George W. Bush spoke about it. And Republican presidents used to speak. I mean, you can tell by their conversation of Republicans, they used to talk so much different than now. It's so sad. But again, I'm not trying to be hating on the Republicans. I understand what they're trying to do. I mean, it's hard to like any Republicans. Republicans now are just complete jokes. Back then, Republicans used to express themselves, at least have some ideas. Even though, yeah, there's not like some of the Republican presidents that was like okay, like not too good that much in their terms. But I mean, this was back then where they had some words of wisdom. Even though, yeah, there's some disagreements to them too. And I have nothing else to say about this. I mean, this event that's occurred, it was so sad to talk about it because for 20 years to come and for generations to come, we should not forget about the stories that the victims and the rescuers have. We shall not forget about the stories that the victims and the rescuers have brought to us and shared us their perspective on their story and their experiences when they were there in New York. It was so sad, and it will go down as one of the most sadliest and the deadliest attacks that will ever happen in the American history. So anyway, without any further, it's time for me to close out the video, and I have nothing else to say about this. It's very unspeakable, and I am completely speechless about this. And I remember when this attack happened, my older brother was 7 years old or 8 years old. I was a baby. I was like a year old when this happened. And that's all I have to say to you. Show some love to the victims, rescuers. Oh yeah, and also I want to point out about the Sesame Street. They actually had an episode. Immediately after the 9/11. That Sesame Street had an episode where It was Elmo hanging out with the owners of the store. They were working for a food restaurant, and that was where one of the foods went out, and that was where it was caught on fire. So they called out firefighters to call down there and to cool down the fire. And firefighters. The whole episode was about firefighters taking Elmo to all the firefighters of what they do to everyday life when something like this happens. That was a very well put together and how they pull off with this, especially for a kids television show, especially for Sesame Street. This was back then where they had the guts to push the boundaries to, and it's not easy. And it's not easy to do. It's not easy to pull it off either. And for Sesame Street, that was really good. That was very well put together. It was really good, really impressive. And Elmo at first was scared, and at the end he is no longer scared. He loves the firefighters. I mean, we should all love them too, no matter what, too. When that episode premiered, man, I remember my parents saw that episode, and they were so mind blowing by how amazing it was. I remember watching it, and I was a baby when Sesame Street. I mean, well, technically, Sesame Street has been around since the 60s, 1968 or 69, I believe. No, 1969, my bad. It still goes on to this day, surprisingly, and I'm glad it is. If your kid has never seen Sesame Street, go and watch, or seen parts of it. Go. It's a must recommend. It's a must recommendation to make their kids watch them, and especially as far as subject matters goes. They pull it off far better than any other kids shows I've ever seen. There's some kids shows that were close, but never touched the magic of what Sesame Street was going for, and that's why I think Sesame Street is one of the most important shows we will ever get in the kids' television shows. And Sesame Street was one of my Sesame Street. I will always watch that show to this day. Even though if not every TV networks will program the show, I don't know why. I think that is important to show their kids to show it. Maybe it's because of how people can't react to certain things. Maybe, who knows. But I just wish that this show was bringing more variety now. I mean, yeah, I know you guys watch Sesame Street now, but I mean, as far as our area goes, we can't. It depends on our network too, like that one cable that we got. But I'm gonna definitely show my kid Sesame Street. I mean, Sesame Street is like the most educational show to any kids' television shows. But that episode that they pulled off with with the 9/11. That one was impressive actually, and it was awesome. So my social media are in the description, just in case if you guys don't have enough time to, if you guys have not followed my social media, go to the social media under description to follow me there. And I mostly talk on social media a lot more than on this channel now. And I've not been pretty busy, but I've been doing, sorry if I get stubborn, but I've been with my families a lot more now. But anyway, bye bye, and I will see you in the next video. Let us never forget the stories that the victims and the rescuers have told us, the amazing stories. So I mean, not amazing, but sad stories that they've experienced. Let us never forget the stories. And I will see you in the next video. Let us not remember the stories they've shared to us, and my prayers goes out to them. Hope. Bye bye.